Kia ora, thank you. Ngā mihi, everyone. E mihi ana ki te whare pukapuka e tu nei, te ringa paraoa e waho nei, ngā maunga kōrero, te awa o hatia e hora nei, tēnā koutou ki ngā mate e hinga atu rā e hinga mai nei. Mihi atu ki au Kaumātua, e mihi ana Ben me te kaimahi o te whare pukapuka ki Whangārei. E mihi ki ngā manuhiri, no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko rangatahi te maunga, ko te ringa paraoa te moana, ko mā tātua te aroa nā toki mata whaurua, tai nui ngā waka, ko Tamaterau te whenua, ko Pakikaikutu toku tūranga waiwai, ko Wikitoria te moana nui, nā rimu tiria, ka whena te moana nui, hori parata oku tūpuna. Ko Tiria Pitimanu toku karani mama, ko Tame Pitimana toku karani papa, ko Constance Pitimana toku mama, ko Gilbert Douglas toku papa, ko June Pitman toku ingoa. It's a real privilege to be here. I'm very nervous because I am in the space, I'm bringing you into a space to join me with my ancestors. I am not a historian as such, but I am very passionate about raising mana Māori within our communities. And so the journey we're about to go on is quite a sacred one. And if you can bear with me, I've got 37 slides, and I figured out if I stick to a minute each, we should come out at about 12 o'clock, but likely we might go over a little bit. Yeah, and I've got a great big prompt here, but it's likely that I'll just go completely away from it. And by the way, we're very safe here today because we have our civil defence team sitting in the front. Tēnā koe. So you might recognise this beach and Tamaterau. So for those of you that obviously you've lived here a long time, but you may not know that the areas along Whangārei Heads Road from Waikaraka through are named for war. So when you come from Onerahirahi, you come next to Waikaraka. Waikaraka talks about the karaka trees and the ritual that that Māori used to use for their warriors who were about to embark on war, where they would come through and be kind of swiped with the karaka branch, and that was kind of like a strengthening, if you like, and a strengthening for battle, and kind of like, you know, putting that mantra there that they will return home. Further along, you'll get to Tamaterau. Tamaterau, Tama, men, Rau, 100, Tamaterau, 100 warriors. Now that name came from a battle that happened on the site where the Blue Heron Motor Camp is currently situated. So the Blue Heron Motor Camp site was actually called, its original Māori name is Te Tii, it's Te Tii. And it was the summer place of the chief Wikitipirihi from the other side of the harbour at Takehiwai. So he would come across and stay on that pa site. Yeah, so that site, Te Tii, was the site of a battle between Ngāti Pūkenga and others, where there were 100 warriors. Sorry, yeah, that's right. I think that's right. I'm going to get some things wrong, but I know you'll correct me. But so I'm just giving you a picture really around the fact that these names all are related to acts of war, if you like. And then, of course, we go over the hill to Parua Bay. Now, at Parua Bay, most people think that it's named because there are two pa sites. There's a pa site on Motukiori, and then there's another one on Rahongawa, which is, you go down the Nook Road at the very end, Rahongawa. Those two pa sites protect the basin that is Parua Bay. But the actual naming of Parua Bay, because Māori don't have the word bay in their language, right? That's the Pakeha add-on addition. So usually we just refer to like Tauranga or Parua. And in this case, Parua is more likely to have been named for the muddy waters, because then you come through there and the mangroves and all of that and the silting up that happens, that's more likely to be what the name was actually named for. Yeah. So, and then on down Whangārei Heads Road and on we go. But so because I'm taking you into a space of our tupuna, I want to just let you come into the space with me through an acknowledgement to music. So bear with me. This tune is called Tamaterau Ancestral Pathways. If you could imagine the waka haurua on their way from Hawaii Nui, making their great migration, navigating by the stars, bringing all their people over to new lands, bringing with them things like kumara and other plants to try and, from the tropics, to try and grow them in Aotearoa.
Ka hoe mai aku tupuna I te moana nui akiwa. Our ancestors crossed troughs and peaks of the great water mountain, all in constant motion and synchronicity, of foundation earth, papatuanuku, of foundation water, tangaroa, of foundation sky, ranginui, and Hawaii, when after many smaller homelands became part of history and legend, woven into the all-embracing cloak of genealogy and remembrance. He tātai whakaheke, he whakapapatapu, he taura tāngata. A land vast and high, crowned in cloud, Aotearoa, beckoned them, embraced them. The first call of welcome echoed, haere mai rā, haere mai, haere mai, and made all complete the tinkling melodic voice of the tui. Tui, 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 ya.
For those of you that might recognise that voice, you might be familiar with Taipare Munro. I composed the music. Billy Karaitiana from up north did the arrangement, and Taipare came in and did the voiceover. It needed a male voice, not a female voice. So I hope you really enjoyed that. So I returned home to Tamaterau in 2020. I started off by camping with my cat Christmas, who's sitting on there. She's a good girl, but we started camping out and started clearing the land. The whenua of my grandparents, my tupuna, was rather overgrown, and I had a lot of work to do. And I've been doing that now for 3.5 years. So usually it's pretty difficult to dress up these days because I'm rather familiar with gumboots and things, you know. Yeah, the 10 days camping with my cat, trying to figure out where I was going to put a tiny house. I wanted to put a tiny house on the land so that I could reduce my carbon footprint. And also the land of Tamaterau is very, let's just say it's got a lot of personality, lots of valleys and crevices and things like that, which can be quite problematic. So I returned home to live on the 17th of October 2020, and since then I've somehow found myself getting involved in lots and lots of things. But what happened for me was when I came home, and I've always been involved with our kainga since I was little, when my mum was still alive, coming to the hui and wondering what that was all about. And now I find myself in that space more often than not. And it's quite a heavy load sometimes to manage, but also a privilege to be able to work for our people. So when I came home, it occurred to me that the landscape had changed, the population had changed, it had expanded, there were a lot more houses everywhere, and it felt to me like the presence of Māori was way, way diminished, you know. And it occurred to me then that how unique is Tamaterau in that all of those families, those Māori families that were living on the whenua long before the area was settled, are still there. We're just a different generation of ourselves. And so that led me to thinking, my gosh, looking at the ages of the people and realizing that our oldest Kaumātua was 90 and the next one was in his 80s and so on, you know, and yet they're still there. They're still really active, and they've got all this knowledge. And often we leave capturing that knowledge until afterwards, you know, we tell stories after people have gone. But the richness is capturing those stories in their own words while they're living. And so all along that prompted me to explore writing capturing their life stories and writing and putting all those stories into exhibition form. So I collaborated with Claire Gordon, a photographer from Kerikeri, who I'd worked with when I was doing work for Ngāti Rehia up there, and she agreed to come along and do all the photography with me. So together we went to each of the people's homes, we sat with them, we let them kōrero, I recorded everything. Sometimes it took, I don't know, an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending. But it was really lovely to sit and listen to their stories. And at the same time, Claire came as well, because that way she could get a sense of place and space. Claire is not Māori, she's Pakeha from England, and she's been working with me on a few Māori cultural projects over time. So it's building her knowledge of Te Ao Māori, if you like. And so it was really good because we could then say to our subjects, where would you like to have your photograph taken? So each of them chose where they wanted their photographs to be taken, which made it more heartfelt and genuine, you know, what you're about to see. So the land block we're talking about here, where all the families live, is called Pakikaikutu. Now, this is the area delineated here, all this land block here. Oh, sorry, I'm away from the microphone. Can you hear me all right though? Yeah, all of this land block here, and that's a paper road that goes from Scott Road up past our Kaumātua, Richard Pui's place, all the way back into the back blocks, which is around Franklin Road area, way up in the back, probably getting close to, and so that's probably getting close to the Awhiwa block road, that Awhiwa Road. Yeah, and then our boundary comes down this way. So that's the old ancient land map of Pakikaikutu, and that comprises around 334 acres of land, and most of it is bush-clad, but once upon a time the front parts of it was cleared for farming. When farming became the de rigueur, our people farmed, but small amounts of cattle, 20, 30, that kind of thing. So I wanted to show you that because Ngāti Pūkenga, Te Tāwera o Ngāti Pūkenga, is the tribe that occupies that land. We're not from here. We are not from here. We were invited to come here. And so we come from Mātātua waka. Mātātua, Ngāti Pūkenga people are Mātātua people. So our descendancy comes down through the captain of the Mātātua, Tōrua, rangatira who brought Mātātua waka over to Aotearoa, and he he made landfall in the Bay of Plenty. Tōrua brought with him some of his family members, including his sister Muriwai and his brothers Puhi, Moana Ariki and Tamatea. Puhi is the ancestor that Ngā Puhi comes off. He was the brother to Tōrua. So I'm explaining that to you because the connections are very, very close. We're all intermingled, even if Te Tāwera is mostly based down in the Bay of Plenty, we are very connected to the north through those whakapapa linkages. Yeah. Tōrua's father told him to look out for 3 significant landmarks, and one of those was a big cave. And that cave was large enough to probably had the capacity for about 60 people to live in it. And if you know hang on, I've just got to get to my notes because I'm going to go wrong here. That cave is very significant to Muriwai because Muriwai, her mother, before they left Hawaii Kinui, Muriwai's mother said to her, when you get to where you're going, I want you to live in this place. And she was referring to the cave. And Muriwai went to that cave, but then she moved on. She married and moved out of the area for a while. But later on, in her later years, she returned to the cave and she lived in there and she died there. So the cave is... Oh, sorry, before I get to that picture, the whakapapa over the other side. I'm quite nervous, sorry. Tōrua, the captain. Wairaki, his daughter. Wairaki's son, Tamatea ki te Huatahi. His son, Tani Moiahi, and his son Pūkenga, our descendant, Ngāti Pūkenga. So if you've ever been down to the Bay of Plenty, you might have seen this along the way. Do you recognise that? No, you don't? This is Muriwai's cave. Yeah, this is the cave that she came into and passed away in. So that cave is full. It's a bit like walking into big cave structures where it's sort of like a big hollowed out area, and it's quite amazing when you get into these formations. But that's where she came back and lived her later years and passed away. Am I ready to go on, I wonder? So this slide here, Tōrua sailed Mātātua to Kākāroa, mooring the waka in the river estuary near the town's current commercial centre. When the waka came in there, the men got off the waka and they climbed the hillside to the pā at the top, Kaputirangi, and left Mātātua in the care of the small contingent of women, including his daughter Wairaka. So while the men were up there doing their kōrero, the tide was going out, and all of a sudden it threatened to carry away the waka. Now, tribal tradition is that women don't touch waka; it's the men's domain. And but the tide's going out and the women are there. What do? So Wairaka exclaimed, "E kia whakatāne au I aho." Let me act the part of a man. And so against all tradition, the women under the leadership of Wairaki, paddled the waka into safety. And it's because of this that Kakahoroa became known as whakatane. Yeah, just to give you a bit of context. So Ngāti Pūkenga, our descendants, have had lots of influence around places and spaces. But in Whangārei, we're the lesser known tribe in what is the tribal network of Whangārei, because we are not from this place originally. So Torua and some of his family, well, for a while the whole contingent stayed down in the Bay of Plenty area, and then Torua and some of his family remained there, but Puhi, Torua's brother, then took Mātātua waka and headed north. First of all, they called into Tauranga Moana, and when they called in there, the Mātātua crew named it Te Tauranga o Mātātua, the landing place of Mātātua. So that's another sort of influence that has come through our tupuna Torua. Puhi then took Mātātua further north and ended up coming into the area around, I think this is right, Tako Bay. So currently, the Mātātua waka is, there's a monument there. The Mātātua waka is meant to be resting within up the river at Tako Bay, and inland from there, accessible through private property now, is the memorial to Mātātua waka, and you can see there that Torua and Puhi's names are on that memorial, as well as Muriwai's. So that's the connection. We are of Mātātua, but it's not just Puhi, Ngā Puhi's waka. It's ours too. Yeah. So yeah, it's a beautiful place when you go up there, but sadly it's sitting in, the access to it is through private land, so it's hard for our people to get there unless they go up the river. And so the people of Ngāti Rehia look after that area up there. So just to give you, I'm telling you all of this because while I was saying that this is about the Kaumātua or Tamaterau, I can't introduce you to them until we go through this lineage and share with you a little bit of Te Tāwera. So, whakapapa genealogy, uemua, tane moeahi, and uenuku rauriri and tuhoi pōtiki were the children of Tamatea ki te huatahi. Tane moeahi is the father of Pūkenga. Yeah. So that meeting house you see there is in the Ruatokis, which is where Pūkenga and his whānau all went to. They went into the Ruatokis to settle for a while. And so that meeting house is way up in the valley of the Uruweras. So we're talking about the area where Tamaiti comes from and so on. That's where our people went to. So Pūkenga, the three sons of Tamatea ki te huatahi and Paewhiti, as I mentioned before, uemua, tane moeahi and tuhoi pōtiki, were quite, how shall I say this, were warriors. You know, they were they call them the warriors of Paewhiti, and so they each had their own clan, when they got older and old enough, of course, they each had their own clan group to look after. And so, so they were known as the warriors of Paewhiti, or known as Toku Toru a Paewhiti. With any tribal system, anywhere in the globe actually, but in terms of Māoridom, there were always a lot of intertribal disputes, if you like. That led to a lot of battles and threats being made, etc., etc. And that happened between the three brothers, Uemua being the oldest. There was a disagreement between Uemua and Tani Moeahi and Tuhoi about some area of land that that was needed by one of them to do cultivations. They had a scrap, a big one, and they had there were threats made where Tani Moeahi, Uemua said to one of his brothers, you know, if I catch you, I'm going to take your heart. And so that threat was pushed back at him from Tuhoi. Tuhoi said, well, if I catch you, I'm going to take your heart. And that's exactly what happened. Tuhoi and Tani Moeahi actually killed their older brother. And Tani Moeahi, I think, was the one that took out his heart. Yeah, so a little bit of that whakapapa there. Gruesome, isn't it? I want to get to our tūpuna Pūkenga. Now, this image up here is taken from within one of our marae down in Tauranga Moana it's in Ngāpeke, and this is some of the tuka panelling from within Whetū-o-Te-Rangi, our wharenui down there. So Pūkenga, when he was born, it was kind of like there was a prophecy around him. So Tani Moeahi, Tani Moeahi married Tani Hiwaro of the Te Whānau Tairanga tribe from Ruatoki. So there's the connections back into the valley again. And she's Pūkenga's mother. But when she conceived, a tribal shaman predicted that her child would, like his father, inherit the shamanistic legacy of his forebears. And for this reason, on his birth, he was given the name Pūkenga. So Pūkenga grew up in the Ruatoki Valley. Have I got the right slide? I think so. Yeah, Pūkenga grew up in Ruatoki in the valleys of Urewera Forest, living at his father's pa Ohai and Pūtiki, and he had many brothers. But his father, Tani Moeahi, in his youth, he'd travelled to a far-off place called Tauranga Moana, and it was really abundant, and he really wanted to go back there, but he didn't. And so, but he kept that idea alive amongst his children and so on, and they kept it alive amongst their descendants. So when Pūkenga was older, he decided to do the same. He would go and follow the footsteps of his father. And he travelled with his younger brother, Ahuru, on foot to Tauranga Moana. Now that's from the Ureweras all the way to Tauranga Moana, a long, long way. When they got there, they found this place was abundant and full of, very bountiful, full of kai everywhere, rich valleys and birds and fish, abundant everywhere. So they wanted to get a better perspective of the wondrous country that they had come to look at. So they decided to climb to the highest summit, to the highest peak, to gain the vantage point that would give them the best lookout over the whole of that Tauranga Moana area. And it took them a day's hike to reach the summit. And so as the evening fell, this is taken from some Pūkenga historical collections that are not available to the public, so and largely from Des Kahutia's tellings. As evening fell, Pūkenga said to his brother, "Kia kai mai taua e konei, let us partake of our meal here." So this, is there anything in there that sounds familiar to you? Kai mai, yeah. Yeah, so the summit they were at, the quote led to the naming of the range of mountains which they were upon as Kai mai. So again, Ngāti Pūkenga putting their footsteps into the landscape. You know, these are the things that are largely forgotten about or unknown. Yeah, so they sat there and had their dinner. And then the next day, they looked at each other and thought, well, which way are we going? And so the younger brother decided he would go inland around the area and settle inland of Tauranga Moana. But Pūkenga was going to go to the seaside, to the ocean. That's where he wanted to go. But because of his status, he needed to go back to tell his people what his intentions were. Gather up his family was his intention and take them to the Tauranga Moana. When Pūkenga got there, Let me just see, Kaumātua, go to the next slide. When Pūkenga got back to his to the Uruweras, he found that war had broken out. There were all sorts of conflicts going on, and he was called upon to become the warrior again. And so he got embroiled in battles up there, and he actually died. And so he never got to go back to Tauranga Moana. But over time, and we're talking generationally, over time his descendants did go back there. But it wasn't easy for them. Lots and lots of wars were happening. There were Pūkenga were losing their lands, and they became a bit nomadic throughout all of this time. They became a bit nomadic, and they also, their land holdings diminished quite a lot. And then, of course, I'm getting a little bit out of context here. And then, of course, you know, things happened like, which we'll go into the next step. But there were intertribal conflicts, there were intertribal alliances made, intermarriages to cement those alliances. And so that's how today our collective tribal mana is derived from the waka mātātua, te aroa, and horauta waka. Yeah, horauta is where Paikea, you might have seen Paikea, the whale rider. Yeah, and Paikea was the ancestral tribe that was in there. So Paikea was the tupuna that, I think that's the right word to use in that case, but was said to have ridden on the back of the mythical whale into that area. So we have those connections too through Paikea. We also, through Te Aroa, we have our connections to Waitaha. Waitaha are known as the mystical people, the people of the mist. Yeah. And remember I said that Pūkenga had that esoteric shamanistic legacy placed on him. So, so with all of those waka, the mana is united as Ngāti Pūkenga. Have you had enough yet? No? Oh, good. It's a talk fest or a lecture fest, it feels like to me. But yeah, just let me share this with you. Throughout time, there's intergenerational fighting and so on. Like I said, the alliances that were formed. So the tribe Ngāti became established after the death of Rangatira Rongopopoia, taking their name from his son Hakupurako, and they inhabited the lands of Wapōtiki. So Ngāti Ha in Māori means breath. Yeah. Does it have a macron over the A when it's the breath? It does. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's right. And Ngāti Ha would go on to merge with the descendants of Pūkenga. The merging of these two great tribes saw both tribal names Ngāti Ha and Ngāti Pūkenga in common usage, although Ngāti Ha was predominant for many, many generations. A faction of Ngāti Ha made their way to Makatu. Has anybody been to Makatu? It's beautiful down there, and they make great pies, and it's where the two girl chefs come from, who are all whanaunga to us. The birds, the girls. Anyway, they do make great pies at the pie shop. Oh. With the intention, so they made their way to Makatu with the intention of making Tauranga Moana their future home. Their forces depleted, Ngāti Ha returned to their foes for support. So this is how it kind of worked in tribal situations. One minute you're fighting them, next minute you're friends with them. You know, one minute someone's in their cooking pot and the next minute they're out having, you know, all of those kinds of things. They're having celebrations of weddings and, oh gosh, it gets quite complicated, this interweaving. So they turned to their foes for support and joined forces with Te Tini or Awa, which comes back to the tribe Ngāti Awa, to support their relations in Makatu, who were at war with Te Arawa. See how it goes? It's crazy. But anyway, Ngāti Ha sought to avenge the deaths of their people and those of Ngaitirangi chiefs killed in battle. So they did many raids and victories. Many raids and victories took place in Tauranga, and many pa sites were left in ruins in the wake of Ngāti Ha. As a result of that, you know, sort of going back and getting utu, if you like. So Ngāti Hā, or Ngāti Pūkenga as they were becoming known, established their presence in Maketu, and they eventually married into the original inhabitants of that area. And they remain there to this day under the tribal name Ngāti Pūkenga. Yeah, my younger sister lives there currently. So a section of Ngāti Pūkenga became close allies with Te Arawa again cementing the alliance with marriage. So we're going through time. And then during the 19th century, the great Pūkenga chief stood his ground, the great chief at the time stood his ground when the combined forces of Ngaitarangi and Ngāti Hawa swept through Maketu, and he exclaimed, "If I should die, then let it be on my own land." Probably in Te Reo Māori, but I don't have that translation. And he and many Ngāti Pūkenga were sacrificed that day for their land at Maketu. So coming forward, where are we now? I'm still on slide 12. Are we on 12? Must be. Hang on. 13, okay. So back, coming forward into to 1836, there was a great battle, a significant battle of Te Tumu. And Ngāti Pūkenga were fighting on both sides because of the reason for that was due to whanaungatanga. You know, the intermarriages, the interconnections, and so forth. So one section was fighting alongside Ngaitarangi, the other in the pa, and the other was on the outside with Te Arawa. So you can see that Pūkenga were closely connected to both sides. And one of the most well-known Ngāti Hā warriors was a rangatira called Kaumātua. He was responsible for extending Ngāti Hā's influence into Hauraki, and to Mōtiti Island and Matakana Islands. So they're sacred areas to us. The other thing that I wanted to say here was another important descendant of Ngāti Pūkenga's through these tribal alliances was Kaumātua. Te Tāwera o Ngāti Pūkenga takes the Kaumātua whakapapa as an important take or reason in terms of claims to the land and merges it with Ngāti Hā and Ngāti Pūkenga whakapapa. So that's the sort of makeup of Ngāti Pūkenga. There was a Pūkenga, there was Te Tāwera, there was Ngāti Hā, there was Te Arawa. All of us are actually whanaungatanga to each other. So quite interesting, isn't it? Well, I think it is. You might not. You might be quite sick of me by now. So we're getting closer to introducing you to the Kaumātua or Tamaterau, and I'm looking at the clock and I better move on. So Te Tāwera, the morning star or Venus. So the story around this, and I just need to get this. So the name Te Tāwera emerged during the 19th century in the time of Tai Tokerau, the father of Te Kau or Rehua. He and his people were descendants of the tupuna Kaumātua, who I just talked to you about. So the name Te Tāwera comes it's not a whakapapa name, it comes from an incident. And the incident was that one morning, a Pūkenga woman, she decided she'd go, her name was Ngā Hokainga. Ngā Hokainga went out fishing early one morning, and she was catching fish, and she was cleaning them and placing it in her kete, which she'd hidden in the reeds on the beach. And unbeknown to her, another person from the Waitaha came along and was watching, and they wanted to go fishing too, but they thought it was much easier to steal her fish. Yeah, so that's what they did. So she came back to find her kete empty. And so she looked up in the heavens and she cried, "O e te Tāwera te whetu marama I te ata." Alas, so Venus, the bright star in the morning sky. So that's from that point on, the descendants of Pūkenga in that area became known as Te Tāwera or Ngāti Pūkenga. So we are of the morning star, and I kind of like that. So so that name really, Te Tāwera or Ngāti Pūkenga, comes back to the descendants of Kaumātua. Yeah, so there are different factions of Ngāti Pūkenga depending on the areas that we are at. So we have 4 kainga One is in Tauranga Moana, Ngāpeke, where Whetū Tarangi is. One is in Maketu, Whakawe. One is in Hauraki Moana, Manaia, and the other is Pakikaikutu. Yeah? So the four kainga, we're spread around. Like I said, we're nomadic people. We lost a lot of our lands through one thing or another, but we were also, because Pūkenga was dedicated to the god of war, Tūmataunga, is that right? Tūmataunga? Tūmataunga, thank you. Tūmataunga, or we call Tū. And so as a result of that, they had a reputation for being very specialised warriors. And so they were often called on to support other tribes at times of war. And in return for that, sometimes they were given lands, but sometimes land was also given because of things that happened that shouldn't have. And so as what we call muru whenua, or making things right. Yeah? And sometimes that making things right can take a long time, you know, sometimes decades to sort out. Yeah. So, where am I now? Te Tāwera, done that. Oh, sorry. Just go over to here. So when I talk about the lands, I'm talking the other thing that came in, of course, and please, I mean no disrespect when I tell these sides of things. There's nothing we don't know already. It's in the history books, but I am respectful. So I mean no disrespect with what I'm about to share. But Te Tāwera went, they had a lot of significant land interests, especially in Te Puna, which is between Bethlehem and Katikati. And Katikati and the lands at Tauranga Moana. Now, the lands at Tauranga Moana were confiscated by the Crown. And the Te Tāwera and Ngāti Pūkenga were harshly punished by the confiscations, even though they didn't participate in the conflicts between the Crown and Māori that led to that confiscation, you know? So during the 1850s and 1860s, Te Kaumātua, who at that time was the paramount leader of Te Tāwera and Ngāti Pūkenga, tried to conduct negotiations with the Crown. They weren't awarded their interest in their lands in Ngāpeke, Tauranga Moana, nor at Maketu. Therefore, as a consequence, they associated with the whenua that was gifted to them by whatever means at Manaia in Hauraki and Pakikaikutu in Tamaterau. Sorry. How are we doing? You all right? So we're getting closer. Te Tāwera o Ngāti Pūkenga ki Pakikaikutu. Sorry, I'm just taking a moment to figure out where I am. Refer to the book. Okay. So we're coming now into the space of Pakikaikutu. So an incident happened, and the stories around this might, there are variables, because in the modern accounts that we have, and certainly in the accounts that were submitted to the Crown when we went through our Waitangi Tribunal claims back in around 2015, I think it was, we looked to the modern story, but the Maori Land Court records actually show up a couple of incidences that would result in the gifting of the lands of Pakikaikutu by the Tribes of Whangārei to Ngāti Pūkenga. Both of them involved killings of people. Yeah, and so the modern story goes that back in those times where Ngāti Pūkenga were travelling everywhere, they were supporting other tribes, even up in the north. They were supporting other tribes in battle. At one point, a Ngāti Pūkenga woman, whose name was Te Rori, was taken as a slave from the Bay of Plenty and brought up here. And she was married to a Whangārei chief, Whare Poaka. Whare Poaka married her. And we don't know for certain, but we kind of feel that they inhabited the pā on Pakikaikutu called Rangatihi. Yeah. there was an incident where a couple of Pūkenga people were killed, and then that was prior to this modern story I'm going to tell you. So that's in the land records there, and it also talks to the people that whose recollections that was. But in the modern day story, Te Rore was taken as a slave and brought up here and married to whare poaka. Ngāti Pūkenga were on their way up to Wairangi, the Bay of Islands, to obtain muskets. Yeah, on the way they decided that they would call into Governor Grey's stash on Kaumātua Island and steal all his muskets, because muskets were very hard, hard commodity to get. There weren't many of theirs, so they called in there and stole his muskets. and then on the waka, as they travelled up, Te Rore's brother was a warrior of Moeroa's, and he wanted to get off and visit his sister on the pā. So they let him off at the area. Do you know where Parua Bay golf course is? So that curve of beach just there, they let him off there. Yeah, and so from there he wandered, and then they went on their way, and there her brother, Kiriopo, I think his name was, he walked along to visit his sister. He walked along the road and stopped at a creek, which the records indicate that might have been a creek that comes out by the Haura property at Tamaterau. He stopped there to have a drink, and unbeknownst to him, he was being tracked by a warrior of the tribes living on the whenua at that time, and he was killed and taken along to Pakikaikutu and prepared and cooked in a hangi and eaten. So so that's our modern day story. When word got out to Moeroa, who was coming back down in his wakataua filled with 100 warriors, taua means war canoe, wakataua, war canoe, coming down with his 100 warriors for revenge or utu. The tribes of Whangārei were quite worried because Ngāti Pūkenga had a reputation as specialist warriors, and they were coming down not just with their own traditional weapons, but with the musket. So they were in deep doo-doo, and they knew that. And so the chiefs all gathered. My understanding is the chiefs all gathered, and we're talking about the chiefs like Te Tirarau, Manahira, Topa, and a few others. They all gathered and had a kōrero and decided that, okay, just cause. So they decided to meet the wakataua when that wakataua came into Parua Bay and close to the shore. They sent out one of their warriors. The chiefs from Whangārei sent out one of their warriors and offered a wero. And so there's a bit of a ceremony around that, what happens. But if that wero isn't, if the chief doesn't send a warrior out to pick up that wero, you know that battle's going to happen. And so for the chiefs of Whangārei, they were thankful because the warrior went and picked up that wero. And so what happened then was the party of Ngāti Pūkenga was taken by the tribes of Whangārei, the representatives of the tribes, along to Pakikaikutu, to the site where their warrior was slain, and then over to further over to Pakikaikutu where the warrior was consumed. Yeah. So that's what happened. The discussions around that led to the gifting of the land, the putting things right. Now, there is some discrepancy in the history around that because kind of around that time, Kawati was having his last battle up at Ruapekapeka, and he was calling for reinforcements, and I think Te Tirarau was fighting another battle somewhere else, out that side, and so he called on Pūkenga, and Pūkenga said, well, we could help you, but just remember, you haven't settled the score for this thing. Yeah? So that's one of the kōrero that goes with that. And so then the settlement happened, and the muru, the whenua was gifted. They gifted all of the lands of Pakikaikutu, which in the original gifting included all the area that encompassed the blue heron right the way around. When Tāwera came onto the land, but then at the time I think it was the Māori Wars broke out again, they went back to Tauranga Moana. They probably left some of their people here, but the bulk of them went back to Tauranga Moana. So it looked like Ngāti Pūkenga weren't here, really. But at the time of the gifting, they were given the mana of, the same mana of, being able to live in the area as all the other tribes of Whangārei Harbour did. That's my understanding from the Maori Land Court records. So, but they went back to their lands, and then there was a time lapse before they came back again. So in that time lapse, a lot of the land that was part of the giving was sold, was sold to the Crown. Remember, at that time, the Crown was going around trying to acquire as much land as possible because they had the Nova Scotians waiting to come in and take over. So, that's what happened. One of the rangatira of the area sold the land, all of the land surrounding Pakikaikutu, the block delineated in that earlier image, to the Crown for a mighty sum, £200. Yeah. So so while we don't today, while today our boundaries don't include that, we very much still think that that's our whenua. That encompassed all our marakai, our gardens up in the Tamaterau domain, our sacred site, which where Wiki Te Pirihi once occupied as his summer place, all of that there, we still consider that we are kaitiaki, along with the original tribal owners of that whenua. And it's very sacred to us. There are very sacred stories attached, historical narratives attached to those places and beyond. So, yeah. Okay, we've done that. So I'm getting to a tricky part now, and I just need to organise myself a bit around this one. So in the 1860s, as you know, the acquisition of land is the hot topic, and for the Europeans coming in at the time, and as a result of that, the 1860s Native Land Acts were introduced. So, and it was really interesting. I did a bit of research on Te Tāwera website, and the 1862 Native Land Act, there was a comment in there that said, an act to provide, the description of the act, an act to provide for the ascertainment of the ownership of native lands and for granting certificate of title thereto and for regulating the disposal of native lands and for other purposes. The 1865 Native Land Act, formation of the Native Land Court, its purpose described by Justice Minister Henry Sill, to bring the great bulk of the lands in the Northern Island within the reach of colonisation, the detribalisation of the Māori, to destroy, if it were possible, the principle of communism upon which their social system is based, and which stands as a barrier in the way of all attempts to amalgamate the Māori race into our social and political systems. Another, whereas by the Treaty of Waitangi entered into between Her Majesty and the Chiefs of New Zealand, it was among other things declared that Her Majesty confirmed and guaranteed to the chiefs and tribes of New Zealand and their respective families and individuals thereof the full, exclusive and undisturbed possession of their lands and estates, which they collectively or individually held so long as it should be their desire to retain the same. I thought they were three quite poignant statements, and I'm not a political person, but there's something that happens inside my heart when I read things like that. I'm running out of time, aren't I? So I might just skip through a few things here, but just to say that in 1865 Native Land Court, when that was established, replacing the 1862 system, in determining ownership, so Māori had to go into the Native Land Court and say why they should have that land. Now, the court was required to name no more than 10 owners. So if our tribes, our people went into court and not all of them knew about it, the lands were given to whoever appeared, and that alienated the rest of the tribe from within their own whānau, let alone their lands. It's shocking. And that was regardless of the size of the land block that they had. Yeah. So that's why a lot of, in amongst ourselves, there's a lot of dissension because we've been disconnected from our whenua. Yeah, and that whenua is intrinsic to who we are as a people. Ah, gosh, well, let's move on, I think. Are we okay to go a little bit over if we need to? Yeah, oh good, it's good. So just showing you there that this is a sort of a timeline, but I want to bring your attention to 1927, and I'll just flick back to this picture here. So you might recognise this, do you? So on the headland, out here, this is Te Waro, or Manganese Point. The area here is that area of flat before, just after Fisherman's Point, where all the campers go and the people go over the bank and drive their cars out to fish because it's too far to walk. So that area there, if you can see this track, that's a horse track that our Māori people used to use to travel on down through to the bay. That is the road that you know today for that part of the area. This little whare here, that would have belonged to the Haura family. And you can see there's an image of a man just standing by the fence there. So that would have been one of the descendants of Rei Haura, who is our oldest Kaumātua on the land today. So quite intriguing. But when the road was put through, they destroyed all of our hangi pits, our cooking places, our tauranga waka, areas where waka were carved, all those sorts of things disappeared. So, but it's quite a nice old photo, isn't it? Somebody had a camera in those days. Yeah. Now, just getting back to that part, so that is part of the whole land fragmentation story, and it's not an easy story to talk about really. But in 1927, the Crown compulsory acquired the land under the Native Land Amendment Act. There were acts coming out of the woodwork just because, we want this, so we'll create this act. That's what it seems to me. And what they did when they took that area to put the road in, and what it did was alienated a significant area that was of cultural significance and importance to Ngāti Pūkenga, the source of sustenance, not to mention alienating the tribe from their kaimoana beds and fishing grounds. So there were gardens all along that area, especially in that area in Waikaraka where all the houses are on the foreshore. All of that was marakai. There was a creek there where waka were being built that comes down from the Pakikaikutu on the other side of the Pakikaikutu. And so there's very sacred space in there, and believe me, you won't want to go in there and mess with it. That's how we were brought up. Don't mess with anything that's tapu, because it comes back to you in the end, and not a good way often. But but getting back to the uniqueness, we're getting there and I need another half an hour. But the families that live along Pakikaikutu that are still remaining to this day are the Williamses, the Dickies or Tiki, the Hauras, the Nelsons, Perry Nelson, who is a part of the Haura family, the Pitmans, that's me, the Pohes, Ngāti Pūkenga from their, Richard Pohe is Ngāti Pūkenga from his grandmother's side, but also Ngāti Kahu or Te Rangarei, one of the tribes that gifted the land. So that's the intermingling again. And then further on, we've got the Pepe whānau. So it's outside our boundary of Pakikaikutu, but relevant to the story because the Pepe whānau, their whakapapa is Ngāti Pūkenga. And then I've taken it along to the Solomons on Rahuikuri. I don't know if many of you know, but the name for Solomon Point is actually Rahuikuri, because it was a gathering place of the chiefs to have discussion. And often they would come, and if it was bad weather, they'd be wearing their rain capes and they'd be huddling down. And so from the top, they looked like a gathering of dogs. Rahuikuri. Yeah, well, Solomon's Point. So those are the families, and I thought it was such a special thing to see that through all these generations of time, from the early 1800s, Ngāti Pūkenga have never left their lands, and yet you don't see them visibly out there in community these days. But how amazing is that? We have never left our lands. We've gone through and seen and witnessed much. And that's a very unique thing, I think, about Whangārei, because I don't think there's many areas in Whangārei that can actually say that. Yeah? So that led me to the exhibition, this one. And it was a wonderful exhibition. And we had the involvement of the exhibition was quite significant as well. Again, Taipari Munro is involved in that with the whakatoki. The toka in here is actually in the Wairau Māori Art Gallery. I was asked to collect a toka from the land, and that one spoke to me. So it began its journey to Wairau Māori Art Gallery from the exhibition. Our oldest Kaumātua, Rei Haura, an incredible man who at the time of this exhibition was 90. He is now 93 and still going. So he's an amazing font of knowledge. But I've put a little quote there in the book, from the book, where he says, "I was only 8 or 9 years old when my father went to war, and it became my job to get the cows in when I'd get home." And that's what young kids did in those days, and you'd probably be familiar with that. He tells a funny story, and by the way, the books are up there. I've only got a few left now. They're $40, normally $45. And if you're interested in the music that I played, it's an original album of music that I wrote and composed, and they're up there. They've got a price on them of $21.99, but I'm going to give them away today for $5 if you want to take a piece of original music home with you. But Ray reads, "Andrew Dickey's father, George, was a fisherman. I went out fishing with him once. We rowed out, but we didn't have much bait. It was night time, and I caught a kahawai, so I threw it into the bottom of the boat for bait. We were fishing, and after a while, we ran out of bait, so I asked George to give me the kahawai. I'd scale it, and we'd use it for bait. But George had already scaled it and eaten it, so we had to come home." I thought that was funny. So Ray, as you know, has been a farmer all his life and is rounding up stock. And this picture is of him on his horse, and he's herding stock. And this is at Pātaua, I think. But I thought it was a lovely image to include. The next one, so we're going in kind of an age. So the next one is Andrew Dickey. Now, his father lived on Pakikaikutu along with Steve Dickey, his cousin. And Andrew is amazing. He must be about 86 now, and he's still teaching people about orchardist. Still works and is an orchardist, and lovely man who keeps very much to himself, very humble, very quiet. But he tells a wonderful story in this book, and which I've entitled "The Bollocky Boys of Parua Bay No. 2 School." So part of that is around 10 or 12 boys went to Parua Bay School, and one day it was time for us to go swimming down at the beach. In those days, we used to ride push bikes, not our own. We used to pinch someone else's. Then somebody said, "We'll bike down the hill with no clothes on." So there we were, all in the bollocky, going down the hill to the beach and straight into the sea on the push bikes. The beach we're talking about is the beach out from Tamaterau Domain. All the girls were down there swimming. We called out, "Get out of the way, we're coming down." We didn't know that old Mrs. Litt was up on her veranda looking straight out and saw us. She phoned my father and said, "There's all these bollocky Maori boys on bikes." Dad knew it was us, and when we got home, we got a hiding. And then we come across to the Dickey whānau. In Māori, their name is Tiki. And they had rather a lot of children, mostly girls. And so Caroline Downs, or Need Dickey, is the second oldest of the remaining girls that are left now. And I think there are only 3 from that family. And she says, hang on, I just got a thing there. "We walked all the way to school, and when we came out at the end of the day, we'd go up the track near where the Tamaterau Hall is now, to the top of the hill on Scott Road, where the old house with a huge orchard of nice pears and apples and guavas that we'd help ourselves to, that belonged to the Andrews, once stood. Mr. Andrews used to see us, and one day he said to our father, 'Your little Maori girls are coming and pinching our fruit.' Dad said, 'Don't you run my little Maori girls down, because one day your little white boy might marry my little Maori girl.' And one of them did." The next person here is Rosemary Dickey, sister to Caroline, and sadly Rosemary passed away in February this year. So, you know, an example of how important it is to capture these stories. Rosemary says, I was the 11th child of 13 born at home, apart from Caroline, who Mum had a hard time with, so walked all the way to Whangārei Hospital to have her. Can you imagine that, walking from Tamaterau all the way to Whangārei? Dad was both nurse and midwife, so when we were born, he'd cut our pito, our umbilical cord. As soon as our pito had changed, following tikanga, we were thrown into Te Parawa, Whangārei Harbour. If you popped back up, you were going to be a strong person. If you didn't pop up and needed a hand up, you were a weakling. I popped up quickly. We miss her terribly. The next person is their sister, Yvonne, the youngest of the family. Yvonne says, hang on, let me make sure I've got Yvonne. Where is she? Hang on. She says, at night time, Dad would take us out fishing and we'd come back in the middle of the night or early in the morning. So this is the area where the houses are on the foreshore that she's talking about. She's coming down from the Pakikaikutu. Mama would leave a lamp burning at the homestead so we'd know where to come to. Sometimes when we were out with him at night, we'd catch little sharks. They'd come up onto the beach and sit there. Dad used to tell us to go and grab them by the tail and throw them up onto the beach. So that's what we'd do and take them home for kai. We'd go along to the little bridge at Waikaraka, dig in the sand there to catch baby eels and take them home to Dad, who'd tell us to take them back. Instead, we'd run down to the runoff and throw them into the well. When Dad went to check the well, there'd be all these eels swimming around in it. Sometimes we'd go eeling right along the road to Donnelly's Crossing. My brother Henry used to catch huge, thick eels and say, catch this, and chase me with it. So you can see there's a lot of practical stuff, but it's all done with fun back in those days. And I guess life was so much simpler then, wasn't it? The next image is of Perry Nelson. Perry and I grew up together. We were both raised by our grandmothers, and they were wonderful, strong wahine toa. And Perry and I used to play marbles together on the kitchen floor in whoever's house we were in, but always the marbles didn't go straight. They always went like this. So I wanted to share a little bit about Perry. He says, Nana and I would often swim or row the dinghy out to the sandbank in the channel to pick pippies. Nana grew flax. Now Nana was a Pakeha woman married to a Maori man, so she had to learn all these skills, just like a Maori woman. Nana grew flax and made kete to put the pippies in. We'd wash them out there in the sea. There are no pippies there now. In the early days, you could walk along the beach and spear flounder from here towards Atwoods and back to Tamaterau Domain. Because we didn't have a refrigerator, we'd only get 2 or 3. We'd tie flax through the gills and carry them home. Sometimes they were as large as 3 hands span. Can you imagine that? Don't get any flounder there today. It's really sad. The next person, I have no idea who she is, but I'm writing on behalf of the Pitman whānau. So, like I mentioned, myself, I was brought up by my Māori grandmother largely, as was my sister Maxine and my cousin Johnny. He was a lot older than me. He was 12 years older and Maxine was 5 years older. So my sister says, oh, sorry, hang on. I need to pay tribute to my tuakana. Where is it? Where is she? Sorry. She says here, June and I used to go to the Blue Heron Motor Camp for shop for lollies, lollipops and ice creams. We'd spend hours playing on the beach eating ice creams and waiting for a turn on the swings. We had lots of fun by the beach, picnics, swimming, building sandcastles, a lot of fun times with our cousins, especially the holidays, sleeping in tents, going for walks and climbing the old pahutakawa trees. They were a source of fun, those trees. And I say, I loved fishing with Nana. While the others were at school, we'd walk down the track past a hedge filled with rambling roses. Nana would stop to poke rosebuds into my straw hat, then pick up her flax kete, grab my hand, and off we'd go along to Fisherman's Point. I'd watch her twirl the line round and round above her head before casting. Sometimes we'd be joined by others, but mostly we had the rock to ourselves. They were lovely times, and my grandmother, when I was born, she was already well into her 70s, So she's very, very old and yet very, very capable. I just want to show you a photograph. So that's my grandfather holding my sister Maxine. And on the line at the back where the clothes are, Ray Howrah went up there one day to find that my grandfather, who didn't have a boat of his own, but who would always be taken over to the shark pools at Takahiwai, people would take him out there and he'd catch all the shark, bring them back, fillet them and dry the fillets on the clothesline behind him. Yeah. And the inset there is my cousin Johnny, who passed away 7 years ago. But my sister talks about Johnny and says, what does she say? Johnny would have to take Mulu, our house cow, to and from Tamaterau Domain for the day. He was always running late. The school bus would be coming down the hill, but he'd managed to sort Mulu out and make it to the bus stop in time. So if you stop at the bus stop in the lay-by at Tamaterau, you'll see that a little bit of that quote on the wall. Yeah. The next slide is the Pohe family. Now, Richard Pohe is the grandson of my Auntie Bella Pohe, who was my great-grandmother's half-sister. So there again, the Pūkenga connection through there. At the time of the exhibition, Richard's wife had just passed away, so he wasn't able to contribute. And so I offered to contribute and write their story for them. Auntie Bella Pohe was the most incredible lady, and you can still see her house. It's as you go up past the domain turn-off, you go up a little bit past all the mailboxes, round the next, just up the road a little bit from there, is a little red cottage tucked in. That's Auntie Bella's house. Yeah. So, yeah, she was really amazing. Auntie Bella was always there with cups of tea for anyone who called in. She was an amazing lady. Auntie Bella's granddaughter, Vicky Houghton, went on to become one of the stars of Whale Rider. She plays the part of the old lady, the grandmother. So there again, another Ngāti Pūkenga connection through film and back to the waka connected with Paikea, Whale Rider. Along the road further from there we come to the Pepes and Cyril Pepe. And Cyril says in here, we learned a lot from our grandmother Eileen, including how to bring a child into the world, how to cut the umbilical cord with a pippy shell. She was a hard case. If a cat needed to be spayed, she'd put it head first down a gumboot so she wouldn't get scratched and deal to it. So that gives you an idea of how robust these women were at that time. Yeah. He says, often we'd go out from the beach along the golf course to pick pippies, cockles and oysters and to go floundering. I'd spare flounder while waiting for the school bus and put them in an empty cream can. Dad would bring the full cream can out, pick up the empty one, lift the lid to see how much cream was on the docket, and there he'd find a couple of flounder for breakfast. They're gorgeous stories, aren't they? Then further along, and we're nearly at the end now, but I want to introduce you to Riki Solomon, or Riki Horomona. Direct descendant of Ngāti Tū, the oldest ancient tribe of the area of Whangārei, the Whangārei heads. Horomona Kaiko was his tūpuna, and Riki has come back onto the whenua to maintain ahikāroa. That's what we're all doing, is maintaining the long burning fires of occupation of our whenua, and we will never leave it, never. He says here, I've always considered Tamaterau to be the gateway for here and the Whangārei heads. It's those steps of arrival, Waikaraka, Tamaterau, Pārua Bay, and so on. The story behind Rahui Kuri is interesting, and there are multiple versions of it. The one among Horomonas refers to the time when all the chiefs of the surrounding areas, Nguru, Tutukaka, Maruata, Glenbervie, Tamaterau, and perhaps even Takahiwai, those men of old would gather for the purpose of discussing matters of importance. The parties would set camp on the hillsides. The chiefs would gather at this particular location, Solomon's Point, Rahui Kuri. And often their kōrero would last for days. From the hilltops, looking down, attendees would see the chiefs sitting wearing dogskin cloaks. It looked like a gathering of rahui, of dogs. rahui kuri. Yeah. So to finish off today, and we're not, oh gosh, we're quarter of an hour over, I bring you to rangatihi, the pā. The maunga that we all call home, we look to that in our pepeha. Ngāti Pūkenga never occupied the pā as such, but rather the lands around it. The pā, we are kaitiaki for all the tribes that did occupy it once. Our bones are buried up in the surrounding areas of the pā and into the hills, alongside the tribes of Ngāti Kahu o Te Whangārei and all the other tribes of the area, Ngāti Tū perhaps, etc. But our bones are in that maunga. We treasure our sacred maunga and respect it. So we are having difficulties today with wild cattle that escaped from an adjoining farmer some time back, and they've broken through our fences, which were already pakaru because they're so old. But the cattle are coming through and they're destroying the ngahere. You know, they really are, and they're actually becoming a threat to all the neighbouring properties now. So something has to be done, but it wasn't our fault. Nobody is taking responsibility. They belong to a Pākehā farmer further up on around the Franklin Road area up there, and he let them out and never bothered to round them up. So now we have a huge problem. Our ngahere is no longer farmed as such, except for Ray Hauer's block, a little bit. But up in our ngahere we have some ancient plant species and they're getting damaged. So we're trying to find a solution of that wild cattle, and it's not an easy one these days. But that's our sacred maunga, and I just want to extend my thank you for listening to me rabbit on for so long. Sorry to hold you up. I hope you haven't got a parking fine out there. But I do want to acknowledge Claire Gordon, who's not here today. She was going to come, but obviously hasn't been able to get down from Kerekere. Claire Gordon, my photographer. Anita Arloff, who edited my works and was always there to give me encouragement. Because it's no easy thing writing a book like this and trying to find what is relevant. Trying to do this slideshow was even more problematic because I knew there are parts I couldn't go to that are sacred to our people in terms of what we can share and what needs to stay within our tribal wānanga space. But I hope I've given you some insight into Te Tāwera or Ngāti Pūkenga and how we have become interwoven into the tribal network of Whangārei. We are very small, our land mass is very small, but we are here to support our other tribes as much as we ever did in the past. And hopefully that will stand for something. It's only been 200 years. So our Kaumātua Tamaterau for allowing us to go and capture their images and bring this talk to you today. Taipare Munro, who's always a constant, always supporting any creative adventure that I go on. I also want to mention my cousin, Dr. June Pitman, who departed us last February. He has been such an amazing support culturally and creatively, and he wrote the poem Ancestral Pathways that I played you earlier. So in doing that and playing that to you, I'm bringing together all of those threads as well to pay my respects. To Daniel Hauraki, Piki te Aroha, Jonah Netana, Paraire and Haere Pirihi, for their blessings and cultural support. And of course the people that helped fund us to bring this work to light, Pōhere Taonga, Ministry for Culture and Heritage, Whangārei District Creative New Zealand Communities, Ben, Glenn and Matt and all the rest of the team at the Whangārei District Library. Ngā mihi, ngā mihi, ngā mihi. Thank you. To all of you, thank you for listening.